Happy Monday and welcome to week 2 of this distance learning. This week's going to look a little bit different. We are going to be talking about the origins of government, but my kind of setup for your assignments this week is going to be slightly different. So because you are all coming from a lot of different schools, a lot of different teachers, and your sophomore year American history kind of got cut up a little bit because of our extended spring break, as they originally called it, I need to find out what you guys already know. So tomorrow in your academic support, or Tuesday if you're watching this on Wednesday, in your academic support, you are going to be given a government pretest. It's going to be a very short test. Your academic support teacher is going to help you with it, and it is not going to affect you either positively or negatively for this class. It will be scored so I can see what you know, but it's not a test in that it's going to be graded. I'm even putting an option on all of the questions where you can just click, I honestly do not know. But I want to know what you do know. What do you already know about American government, and what do I need to spend a lot of time this year teaching you? So by origins of government, I don't mean 1776, we signed the Declaration of Independence, and all of a sudden we're a new government. I also don't mean in 1787 when we finally ratified the Constitution. We're going to look way back. I'm talking mid-16th century, when we had explorers, traders, and settlers who first made their way to North America. Although they came from all over Europe, we had the French, Dutch, Spanish, Swedes, and others. The largest number by far were the English, and it was the English who soon controlled the 13 colonies. And it was the English who brought with them 3 ideas that largely shaped our government. They brought with them ordered government, limited government, and representative government. The English colonists saw the need for an ordered regulation of their relationship with one another for government. So they created local governments based on those that they had known in England. So the fact that we have offices of the sheriff, the coroner, assessor, justice of the peace, grand jury, counties, townships, all this came from the English. Another really important idea that they brought with them is the fact that the government is not all powerful. They're restricted in what they may do, and each individual has certain rights that government cannot take away. This is called limited government, and it was deeply rooted in English belief and practiced by the time the first ships reached the Americas. It had been planted in England centuries earlier, and it had been developing there for nearly 400 years before Jamestown was settled in 1607. Another concept that had been growing in England for hundreds of years was that of representative government, government of, by, and for the people. It's the insistence that people should have a voice in deciding what government should and what they should not be able to do. These 3 ideas can be traced back to some landmark documents, and so I also want to take a brief look at what these documents have done for the United States government today. So the first document we're going to look at is the Magna Carta from 1215. I know, I'm talking about something from over 800 years ago, but bear with me while I explain. So in this document, the barons, they were the wealthy elite. They were sick of the way the king was treating them. They were charging them ridiculous amount of taxes to keep fighting and losing in an attempt to take over the French. And they were sick of the absolute rule of the king. So they forced King John, with a sword to his head, to sign the Magna Carta. The Magna Carta included fundamental rights like trial by jury and due process of law. Due process of law is basically fair treatment through our normal judicial system, and these rights show up in the first 10 amendments to the U.S. Constitution. These protections against the absolute power of the king were originally intended only for the privileged few, but we did find over time that they were included in other English documents. So the Magna Carta was respected by some monarchs and ignored by others for 400 years as England's parliament began to grow. In 1628, Charles I asked Parliament for more money and taxes, but they refused until he signed the Petition of Right, the next document I wanted to talk about. The Petition of Right limited the king's power in several ways. Most importantly, the document demanded that the king could no longer imprison or otherwise punish any person but by the lawful judgment of his peers, or by the law of the land. It also insisted that the king could not impose martial law, which is rule by the military, in time of peace, or require homeowners to shelter the king's troops without their consent. In addition, the petition stated that no man should be compelled to make or yield any gift, loan, benevolence, tax, or such like charge without common consent by act of Parliament. The petition challenged the idea of the divine rights of the kings, declaring that even a monarch must obey the law of the land. The last document I want to talk about might sound a little bit familiar. It's called the English Bill of Rights. The year is 1688. There's been years of revolt and turmoil, and Parliament actually offered the crown to William and Mary of Orange. However, Parliament wanted to be sure to prevent abuse of power by William, Mary, and all future monarchs, so they drew up in 1689 the English Bill of Rights. The English Bill of Rights prohibited a standing army in peacetime, except with the consent of Parliament, and required that all elections be free. In addition, it included guarantees such as the right to a fair trial, freedom from excessive bail, and from cruel and unusual punishment. Our nation has built on, changed, and added to those ideas and institutions that settlers brought here from England. Still, much in American government and politics today is based on these early English settlers. So as you can tell, some of the rights guaranteed in our government today can be traced back to the English documents from centuries ago. But I want to also take a brief look at some philosophical arguments on what a right really is and what the responsibility is of the government to give us these rights. At its heart, the Declaration of Independence proclaims, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed." Thomas Jefferson was one of the main authors of the Declaration of Independence, and he drew a lot of his inspiration from English philosopher John Locke, who in 1690 wrote two famous essays on government. You may recall me mentioning Locke last week when I talked about the social contract theory, in which each person agrees to a government that protects everyone's rights. Essentially, there's a trade-off that occurs when we live under government. People trade perfect freedom for increased security. They do so by mutually agreeing to abide by the will of the majority. Is this getting confusing? Let me have someone else explain it to you.
This is a story all about how we all have rights, and if you allow, I'd like to take a minute, just sit right there, and I'll explain it all in detail just to make it clear. In jolly old England, all started with Hobbes, who believed that the king had just one job, keeping us chillin' villains up to no good, and all making sure the people doing what they should. He thought the people were bad, all they need is control. Ruling over them was a royalty's role, but John Locke thought, hey, now that just ain't right. He said, I'm gonna make some changes and define our rights. He thought and he pondered about it day after day. The king gives the rights, man, there ain't no way. He pulled out his quill and he pulled out some paper, put his thinking cap on, and said, I might as well write it. First off, yo, they're from God. Giving them a birth, you know they ain't too broad. Does this mean that people get to keep them for life? They're natural rights. But wait, I mean, there's more liberty, and that life and property are all the rights that we have. Yeah, I sure think so. They'll never be taken, and if someone tries, then the government breaks it. Well, if you're feeling like your rights might not be safe, get some help from the government so long as they behave. They're trying to protect your rights from oppression. It's a promise, it's a vow, even a constitution. The power can be bad, and if things don't go well, they take away your freedoms and your rights they can quell. If that ever happens, there's no need to dwell. It's your moral obligation, your homes, and rebel. So your property, life, and liberty are safe, and you're keeping them all from your birth to the grave. No need for a kingdom, it's like there's a new life, power from above, and your natural rights.
John Locke argued that every human being has natural rights, and no one should harm another in his life, liberty, or possessions. John Locke says government has a duty to protect these rights. He is arguing that we are all born with natural negative rights. A negative right is a right that requires others to not interfere with your actions. This is where government does not give you rights and therefore can't take them away. You're born with them. This contrasts with the new political idea of positive rights. It's a right where someone else has a duty to provide you with a good or service. Like government can give you healthcare, education, etc., but they could potentially take it away. This, however, is not what Locke was referring to. He was referring to negative rights, which was still pretty progressive for his time. Although this week is slightly different in that I'm not giving you a critical thinking question, I still want you to think critically. So let me have someone else explain the difference between positive and negative rights. And I want you to think, where do you lie in this debate?
Positive and negative rights, the terms we use there are two ways to examine this idea of what a right actually is. And America was founded very clearly on the concept of negative rights. And negative rights, the common parlance, is freedom from. You are free from. And what are you free from? You're free from governmental intrusion into your own life. A negative right is the right not to have something done to me. So when we talk about freedom of speech, it's a negative right in that I have the right to speak without the government silencing me. And when we think about this sort of right, and we've got the right to peaceful assembly, the right to free press, the right to free exercise of religion, all these things right from the First Amendment. What do these rights cost? Monetarily. And it turns out they cost nothing. So negative rights are interesting in that everyone can have them equally. You can have a set of negative rights, I can have a same set of negative rights, and they can both be enforced in the same fashion. Positive rights are freedom to, where people are free to do certain things. And here we have the government as the great facilitator. So where negative rights rein in the government, positive rights empower the government. What that means is you have the right to require that someone else provide something for you. By taking from some to give to others, typically in the form of taxation. The Affordable Care Act is a perfect example of this.
The Affordable Care Act allows individuals and families and businesses to get health insurance that is easily accessible. It has a higher quality of care, and it is affordable.
When it becomes a right, now it's incumbent upon the government to provide it for everyone.
The goal of the ACA is to get more people insured. There are certain people who can qualify to get their premiums paid by the government.
Now that becomes very different because you and I cannot have that right in the same way because we have limited resources. We have so many resources. If you have a right to health care, then you have a right to say these resources need to be used to provide my health care.
And when that happens, that means some must pay for others.
Now, all of a sudden, you have a situation in which somebody's got to decide whether your right takes precedence over my right, and we're no longer equal now. So I guess the question then is, maybe that's still a right thing to do because you're providing health care to these people. And maybe, so you have, one sweater instead of two, but this guy has health care. Or you have one car instead of three, but this guy has health care. Maybe that's a good trade-off.
So this is the essential difference between a positive and a negative right.
One of the places you see positive rights playing out is in a free market. I agree to give you money, you agree to give me a product, so therefore you have a right to my money, I have a right to the product by virtue not of a government authority, but by virtue of our mutual, our voluntary agreement.
The government of the United States of America has, over time, shifted from a government that secures rights in the negative fashion to a government that provides rights in the positive fashion.
Positive rights don't work nearly as well when they're seen in the context of government. In the context of government, negative rights work very well, because with negative rights, we don't have to choose whether your right takes precedent over mine. We get to be equal in the eyes of the law.
And here we find that the real question about self-governance is it sustainable given this shift that has occurred?
So later this week, you're going to be responsible for reading 2 articles about this debate on rights. And rather than do a critical thinking question, I'm going to attach a Google form to these articles. If you're not familiar with the Google form, it's a way for me to do multiple choice and short answer questions online. The one thing I do want to prepare you for, though, is once you start that Google form, if you were to exit out of the screen or close your computer, you would lose all your work. So unlike in Google Docs where it saves your work and you can come back to it, you cannot do that with the Google form. So when you start this Google form at some point this week, I would wait until you've read both articles and you're giving yourself enough time. Generally, students need anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes. up to 40 minutes. I've had students do it in as quick as 5 or 10. And so I really recommend, if you start the Google Form assignment, to start it at the beginning of your academic support period, or do it at home when you know you're not going to be interrupted. You're going to read some articles on the debate that the video briefly mentioned, and I kind of alluded to earlier, is, do rights come from God and our nature, or do they come from the government? And if they do come from the government, what is the responsibility of the government to maintain these rights and to make sure that we're all given an equal opportunity to them? So a few things about this week and last week that I wanted to chat with you about before this EdPuzzle comes to an end. First off, again, I want to remind you, tomorrow or Tuesday, if you're watching this later, in academic support, you are going to be taking a short pre-assessment. Again, it will not be scored, and your academic support teacher is going to get you set up with that. It is an online assessment. Also, I wanted to talk about some things from last week. So last week you had 4 assignments. You had an EdPuzzle of me, an EdPuzzle of another video, you had the critical thinking question, and the Gimp Kit. And so I wanted to talk about those 4 things. First, the EdPuzzles. You can count on having an EdPuzzle every week. If it's not a video that is from the internet, then it's going to be me, because this is the only way that I can ensure that you're listening to a lecture. So in class, I always like to say that I don't like lecturing. Like, I never spend the full 48-minute period talking because I get bored, you get bored, and we don't all have the attention span for that. And so this EdPuzzle is a way for me to get some ideas to you and some topics to you that I don't have because we're not meeting each other face to face. So you're always going to have an EdPuzzle. A few of you waited until Wednesday to email me that you were having some struggle with it, which is fine, and I'm always happy to reply. But I do recommend, if you're going to be having any issues, if you foresee having any issues, if you're not really comfortable with some technology, that you try to get as much done as you can during these academic support periods. So some of the EdPuzzle issues that I've seen in the past is, if you try to click on the link and you're logged into a personal Gmail account, or it can be from your homeschool, then it will not allow you to complete my EdPuzzle video. And so make sure when you're logging into EdPuzzle, before you really do anything on your Chromebooks or whatever computer you have, log out of any personal account. When you click on the link that I post to Classroom, it should take you directly to the video. And at this point, I believe I have all of you added onto my class. So continue to reach out with concerns. But again, with EdPuzzles, you're going to have one every week. And if you foresee this being an issue of completing it at home, try your best to get it done during one of your academic support periods. Like this week, you get 6 of them. So try to get that done during the academic support period. And also, with that being said, I hope you noticed, if you start an EdPuzzle video and you get interrupted for whatever reason, once you log back in, you can fast forward to the spot you left off. So I know it doesn't let you skip ahead, but when you log back in the next day or later that day, it will let you skip to where you wanted to talk about was the critical thinking question. We are going to have those fairly frequently throughout the year. The question is going to be different, and sometimes I'll provide alternate sources for you. But what I really need to encourage you to do is to make sure you look at that rubric. So last week, I asked you to choose the best form of government in your opinion. And I provided you with 2 sources. They were both opinion-based. They were biased, because what my real hope for you for this whole year to be able to do is to form your own opinion. So to recognize that you're reading a biased source, which a few of you actually reached out to me and was like, this is pretty biased. And that's how the media and how frankly, any writing is going to be. We're all going to kind of put a little bit of our opinion on it. And so what I want you to be able to do is take the opinions of others and form your own. And so know that if I give you 2 conflicting sources, that it's because it's 2 people who disagree with each other, right? So what I gave you were 2 articles about why democracy is or is not the best form of government. And what I was asking you to do is to choose, if democracy is, why, and if it's not, why not? And some of you were able to then look at other forms of government. So if you thought democracy wasn't the best form of government, then you told me why you thought an oligarchy was the best form of government, or a communist society would be the best form of government. And that's perfect. For those of you who say you kind of struggle with history, or you struggle with social studies, or you're not entirely interested, my advice to you is to read both articles and to provide for me what you've learned from them. So you can say, I've learned that those who think democracy is the best form of government think it's the best because this. I agree with this part, or I disagree with that part. And so I'm just asking you to form your own opinion. Please continue to reach out to me. If I can't reply via Google Classroom or email or remind in a way that makes sense, then we can arrange a time where I can call you, or you can call me, or I can stop down in your academic support and help you as well. So I hope that clears up some confusion on the critical thinking question. I've continued to read some of your responses, and I have a few of you did some Flipgrid responses, which I really like because I feel like it's a better way for me to get some face-to-face time with you. So continue to do that, and please continue to reach out. Class is starting. Continue to reach out. Okay, next up, what I wanted to talk about was the Gimp Kit. So my hope was your first week here in your academic support, some of you played the Gimp Kit about the CTEC teachers, and I thought that it was great because it was giving you kind of a look at what this was. When we play Gimp Kit in class, I always say it's a way better version of Kahoot because you're able to compete with each other, but also attack and team up with each other. There's a freeze mode where you can freeze someone for 15 seconds so they can't answer any questions. I think there's one where it takes like 50% of their points. There's a linked up where if your friend is answering a lot of questions, then you get the same amount of points as them. So that's why I like doing it in class. But for this virtual learning, I also like it because it's an opportunity for you to test your knowledge with some quick multiple choice questions. My intention, however, was not for you to be sitting at the computer for an hour doing it, which I saw that some of you did. So I wanted to take a minute to show you some of your options on Gimp Kit to make this a much more fun and easier experience, because again, I did not want it to take so long. So I'm going to show you the screen. Take a look. I think I'm going to turn the music on for you as well. Once you get a question right, once you get a question right, you're going to see shop. And so what you're going to do is you're going to actually click that shop. When you click shop, it's going to bring you to a whole bunch of options. There's a money per question option, a streak bonus, a multiplier, insurance. If you click on the money per question, it's going to allow you to, based on how much money you have, up your amount. So when you start the game, you're only getting $1 per question, but when you get more money, go and buy some more. Get $10 per question, get $100 per question. That's going to help you rack up those dollars a lot quicker. The other one they have is a streak bonus, and so the streak bonus will give you rewards for answering a lot of questions in a row. So make sure you utilize that as well. There's also on the bottom the power-ups or the upgrades. Those you're probably not going to use as much when you're playing virtually, but it's kind of an option for when we come back. So I hope this helped. And again, I do apologize for those of you it took a really long time, and I hope you were able to have fun with it, those of you who were able to find some of these tools and power-ups. All right, one last thing, and then I'll let you get on to the Google form or to your other academic classes. Tomorrow, Tuesday, is September 1st, and every first of every month, as long as I remember, the first words out of my mouth when I wake up are rabbit, rabbit. You can look it up. You can Google it. It's some old wives' tale. I think I read somewhere once that it came from England, but it's something that me and my husband have been saying for years. The first words out of our mouth on the first of any month is rabbit, rabbit. I've taught it to my students in the past. Ask Mr. McNichol about it. He's used it as well. And basically, it's just a way to kind of look forward to the month ahead. My husband and I actually got married on the 1st of August. It was a random Wednesday, but we wanted to set ourselves up for a lifetime of happiness. I will warn you, some of my students set rabbit, rabbit on the 1st of March 2020, and you know what happened there. So they may blame me. But that's all I have for you this week. I think it's a be kind of day. Have a great week and continue to reach out.